Okay, so this is it. I know in the previous Canucks video, the post-game for Vancouver-Detroit, I said it, I declared it, I belted it out with all my heart. The Vancouver Canucks playoff chase is done. The Miller point streak was done, that's undisputable. But this weekend, for the Vancouver Canucks, it's gonna be pretty intense. We had ourselves the Donnie and Dolly segment from yesterday where Thomas Drance was brought onto the show. I highly recommend you go and watch this if you want to get a perspective on just the seller's kind of idea here, because when it comes to Thomas Drance, I'm pretty sure a lot of people, especially on Twitter, are aware this guy's super sell, because the team just isn't good enough, and if you want to go out there and build this team to become a contender night in, night out, you know, a solidified playoff lock that goes out there and contends for a cup, not just a team like the Canucks are today, where they're trying to make the playoffs, they're a wild card contender, and should they make the playoffs, oh, it's anything happens. We never know what happens then. You know, an 8th seed can win the Stanley Cup any year now. So just gotta go out there and wish for the best. Thomas Drance is not really a fan of that second perspective. He is more a fan of the idea of building a team to become a contender, and if it means going through a few rough years of selling and getting rid of good players, then so be it. Yesterday's segment on Donnie and Dolly had him pretty much yelling at Rick Dhaliwal, talking about how the Vancouver Canucks, in their perspective of, okay, if they wake up Monday morning and they're 1 point out of the playoffs, they're not going to go out there and sell. Thomas Drance critiqued that idea very, very heavily. And it's kind of why I wanted to make this video too, because the Vancouver Canucks, if you take a look at the NHL standings right now, they are not in the playoffs. They haven't been for months now. But you take a look at the current wildcard situation. Nashville has 74 points. They are in the first wildcard spot. Dallas, they have 69 points. They are currently out of the wildcard. Vegas is in the second wildcard. They have 70 points. The Vancouver Canucks right now are 3 points removed from the wildcard, and they're 4 points removed from actually being by themselves solidified in a wildcard spot. They have themselves 1 fewer game played over Vegas. Dallas has 3 fewer games from Vancouver. The current playoff odds for the Vancouver Canucks go as follows. They have a 9.4% chance at making the dance. Vegas has themselves a 56.9% chance of making the playoffs, and the Dallas Stars are at 66.6%. These 3 teams are there battling for that final wildcard spot, and because Edmonton is starting to win games again, I mean, they're at 72 points now in 61 games. They've won 4 games in a row, and so they've been on a mini tear that has really pushed them above and beyond the other 2 teams. Now, of course, it is only a 5-point separation between the Vancouver Canucks and third place in the Pacific, but with 20 games to go, that's going to be a lot of ground they have to make up. They can only afford like 5 or 6 regulation losses, period, in the last 20 games. So the Vancouver Canucks going out there and making the playoffs, quote-unquote, it's really slim at this point. And the game against Detroit the other night, where I said that they were not going to make it and their run is over, that was pretty much fueled not just by the game itself, but by all the other games going on too. Vegas winning their game, Edmonton winning, LA winning, Dallas winning. It was worst case scenario for Vancouver. And as a result, you go into this weekend thinking about what these 2 games really mean. Rick Dhaliwal said on Donnie and Dolly that these 2 games, Calgary and Buffalo, are going to play a part into what the Vancouver Canucks will do on Monday when the trade deadline comes. Thomas Drance went out there and yelled at Rick Dhaliwal and said, no, why should it matter? Why should these 2 games decide the fate of the Vancouver Canucks at the trade deadline? Because in his perspective, it's already clear enough that the Vancouver Canucks are not good enough to make the playoffs. And if by some miracle they do make the playoffs, who's to say they're just going to go out there and not suffer at the hands of the Colorado Avalanche or whichever other team they're going to play in the first round? The team isn't good enough in his opinion. And you know it's odd, I've said it a few times myself in prior videos, but when the Vancouver Canucks are really going, they're a good team. This team, especially up front, knows how to put the puck in the net when they're all on their game. It's just when it comes to the way they play in their own zone and how they often have to rely on Thatcher Demko to bail them out, even in some of the wins that they're getting, Thatcher Demko still has to come up with 2-3 game-changing saves that should have probably been goals had it not been superhuman Thatcher Demko stepping up to bat. This team, despite the fact that their offense is pretty talented once in a while, just is not good enough defensively and consistent enough defensively for me to really believe that they are a playoff team today. It's why Rutherford came in here and said, okay, look, like, we want to get faster in certain areas of the lineup, I want to improve the defense, I want to get draft picks, I want to get younger, because when it comes to the time that Quinn Hughes and Petey are going to be in their primes, which is not today, you've got to have a lineup around them that can flesh out the remaining parts of the game. And so when it comes to what they should be doing at this trade deadline, in my heart of hearts, I still see this team as a team that's not good enough to be a playoff contender, and thus, I don't think they should be going out there and making decisions based off of these 2 games. Dollywell's perspective is indeed correct that if the Vancouver Canucks wake up Monday morning and they're 1 point out of the playoffs, who's to say they're going to start selling? But Thomas Drance went out there and said something that was pretty funny as well. Okay, that's a perspective that works out in Canuckland, but on here, on planet Earth, what makes you think it would be appropriate for this team to not go out there and sell? To me, I think it's all one domino away from falling down hard, because when it comes to guys like Tyler Motte, for example, let's say the team does lose their 2 games against Calgary and against Buffalo on today, not on today, but like today and tomorrow. Let's say they lose both of them. Tyler Motte's asking price, I'm sorry, if you're still looking for at least a second-round pick that is like in the 40s or higher, you gotta be willing to let the foot off the gas pedal a little bit, man. If you're getting a 3rd-round pick for Tyler Motte, you're trading him away. You have to get these draft picks. You have to get these assets. If you're going out there and thinking about Brock Boeser and what he's been doing for the team the past few weeks, if there's a team shelling out a right-handed defenseman that is young or a prospect or 2 that do indeed fill out those sides on the lineup, I do think you go out there and you make that move. If a trade comes up and it's good enough, I think you take it. What the Vancouver Canucks should not do, however, in the case of guys like Boeser and Garland and Miller, is settle. If you really were inclined to trading away a JT Miller of all people, don't make the same mistake that Jim Benning did. Don't trade away JT Miller for Nick Bonino, Lucas Spiza, and a 1st-round pick. You gotta get a little bit more than that. Sure, I get it, Ryan Kessler back in the day was kind of limiting in his options because he only wanted to go to 3 teams, but JT Miller does not have a no-trade clause. He doesn't have any protection on that contract, so should the Vancouver Canucks really find themselves the idea of trading away a Miller, it's got to be for an offer that blows their pants away, a la a Brandon Hagel plus 2 forts for 2 firsts and 2 other roster players. Of course, I do think that Miller is a little bit better than Brandon Hagel is, but you get what I mean, right? That was a trade where a team overpaid to heck for this guy. You take a look at what the Rangers were offering for JT Miller, just pretty much their scraps. Oh, here's Niels Longfist and a prospect in Will Coyle. No, absolutely not. You have to realistically try to look at what the Canucks could get in these trades and say to yourself, okay, what do you think is going to be more helpful to the Vancouver Canucks in 2026? A right-handed defenseman from the LA Kings like Helge Grans, who will be in his early 20s, breaking into the NHL and finding himself a solidified role on an entry-level deal? Or a Brock Boeser with a $7.5 million qualifying offer a few years down the trajectory that he is currently on, which isn't really that great if you look at what he was back when he was a rookie. Like, I'm sorry, I love Brock, I've said this before, but man, if it were up to me, and I was the GM today, I would be trying my butt off to go out there and see what the market would offer. It would be really difficult for me to try to justify trading away Conor Garland. For Boeser, I would be a lot more inclined to do it, but of course it would depend on the return. For JT Miller, this guy is just so good that I think he's played himself out of the conversation of trade talks, because you don't trade away a top 10 point producer in the NHL for just anything. It has to really be a lot, and I don't really think there are too many NHL teams that would be willing to shell that out. And when it comes to everybody else, I mean, Tucker Pullman, Myers, if you have anybody that wants these guys for anything, you trade them away for anything. Like, holy crap, I think this team could do better than those guys. And the cap space is pretty valuable as well. For Tanner Pearson, it's a little bit tough because he actually has been playing really well as of late, but again, it goes down to the same argument. If a team is willing to shell out good enough assets, I do believe I would do it. So, for the Vancouver Canucks, I really do think it's a case of dominoes. Once Tyler Motte gets traded, because that seems like an inevitability at this point, all of a sudden you lose out on one of the more important guys in your bottom six, and as a result, do you really think this team should be going out there and trying to contend afterwards? I get it, it's tough to tell players and coaches, oh, don't win games. That's not really what you're going to go out there and do. It's just, do you allow this team to go out into a season, try to use up the last few months of some of these players' contracts, and potentially let them go in free agency for nothing? For Brock, there's RFA protection. For JT Miller, there's an extra year left. For Conor Garland, he's got a boatload of years left. So if you really wanted to say trade him, and you could trade him away, let's say at the draft when the picks are more solidified, I could totally understand that perspective as well. But for some of these other players, the expiring UFAs to be, you guys got to make some moves. And so these two games, whether or not they win, they lose, whatever, they're 1 point out of the playoffs by the time Monday morning rolls around. Who really knows? But let me know in the comments your thoughts about the Vancouver Canucks and what they should be doing heading into the trade deadline. This is it, my friend. They're done after this. After this mini weekend series of games and after the trade deadline, we should be getting a bigger picture as to where the team is going to go. And so, let me know in the comments all your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.